If you want to know how close a human being can come to death without quite stepping into it, listen to me. I remember the exact second the Titanic tore itself open. I remember the shudder in her bones, the sudden tilt that sent a brass lamp swinging, the gasp that escaped my throat before my mind knew to fear. I remember gripping the railing so tightly my fingers split at the nails. And I remember one more thing, something I have never said out loud until now. I knew we were already doomed, long before the iceberg hit. That is the truth I carry like a bruise under the ribs. A truth that begins not on the night the great ship died, but 3 days earlier, when I first stepped onto her deck with a feeling so cold it traced its fingers up my spine. My name is Emily Carter. I was 24 then, and as I walked up the gangway with my suitcase and my trembling heartbeat, I felt as though someone, or something, had whispered my name from deep beneath the waves. It was the kind of feeling you try to swallow, the kind that makes you smile politely at strangers, even though your bones are whispering, "Run." But I didn't run. I boarded, because I had nowhere else left to go. My father had died 2 years before, leaving behind debts and silence. My mother had hardened with grief until she became a stone I couldn't climb. My older sister Clara had sailed for New York to work as a seamstress, sending me letters filled with clumsy hope. "Come to me, start over, don't stay there alone." When her last telegram arrived, 3 frantic lines promising me a job and a place to sleep, I folded it into my coat and bought a ticket on the newest, grandest ship on Earth. But even as the Titanic's shadow swallowed the dock in Cherbourg, even as families laughed and posed for photographs, even as the crew barked cheerful orders, I felt something wrong humming beneath the surface of everything. A vibration almost too faint to notice. A warning. I told myself it was nerves, nothing more. I told myself I was lucky, blessed even, to ride a ship the newspapers called unsinkable. But as I stepped onto the Promenade deck and felt the boards shift under my feet, some instinct inside me whispered again, "This ship will break you, Emily." I wish I had listened. I met Jonah Mitchell because fate has a dark sense of humor. He was leaning against a rail, polishing a brass fixture with a cloth that looked too small for his big hands. A steward, not one of the polished first-class ones, but the kind who did the hard work below. Coal smudges darkened the cuffs of his sleeves. His hair was black as wet stone, his jaw sharp, his eyes the color of November mornings. I didn't notice any of that at first. I noticed the way he was watching the water, jaw clenched, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. I asked him where the smoking room was. He didn't even look at me when he answered, "You're shaking." "What?" I straightened, embarrassed. "I'm not." "You are." His voice was low, matter-of-fact. "Storm coming?" I frowned. The forecast said clear skies. I wasn't talking about the weather. That was the first moment, the very first, that he looked at me fully. And something in his eyes told me he felt it too, whatever it was haunting the air around the ship. It was the first hook woven into my fate. I didn't know then that Jonah would become the last face I searched for as the lifeboats dropped into black water. I didn't know that he would grab my hand hours before death swallowed the deck and say words I still dream about. No, all I knew was that he seemed to understand the tremor in my body without needing to be told. We walked the deck together that morning. He told me about the Titanic as though she were a living creature, her heartbeat in the engine room, her breath in the steam pipes, her moods in the creak of her hull. He joked that she liked to show off. He didn't joke about the things she hid. The wind raked my hair, the sea glittered, laughter spilled from clusters of passengers, and yet under all of it, I still felt that wrongness, like a rope pulled too tight. "Does she always," I hesitated, "feel this tense?" Jonah slowed. "What do you mean?" "I don't know." I pressed a hand to the rail. "Like she's listening." He studied me with an unreadable expression. "Some ships listen," he murmured. "What do they listen for?" "Trouble." I exhaled. a thin ribbon of breath that shook despite my efforts. Jonah didn't mock me. He didn't soften his tone either. "Just stay aware," he said quietly. "Some nights the sea talks back." That night, the first micro-hook struck like a knife slipped under a door. I was gazing at the stars from the upper deck when I felt the ship shiver beneath me. Not sway, not roll gently with the waves, shiver, like something enormous had brushed against her hull. A deckhand muttered about drift ice. A woman nearby laughed nervously. A group of young men kept playing cards, pretending they hadn't felt the vibration at all. But Jonah felt it. He appeared beside me as if pulled by the same thread that was tugging at my spine. He didn't speak. He just put a hand on the railing, leaned slightly forward, and closed his eyes like someone listening for footsteps in the dark. The ship grew still again, but my heartbeat did not. His voice was barely audible. "Everything in its place. For now." Those last two words set my nerves trembling again. For now. We sailed into the next morning under a sky as clear as polished glass. Children ran, men smoked on deck, women gossiped with parasols shading their faces. Life went on as though nothing in the world could break a shining, beautiful machine like the Titanic. Until a steward approached a cluster of passengers late in the afternoon and said quietly, "We struck ice last night." The woman he spoke to gasped. A man chuckled as though it were a joke. But I froze. Struck. Ice. The two words felt like the edge of a door opening into darkness. I kept close to Jonah through the next hours. He didn't say much, but I saw the tension feather through his shoulders whenever officers passed. I saw the way he glanced toward the bow as though expecting it to speak. Evening arrived with a strange, sharp bite in the air. Passengers wrapped shawls around themselves. I watched a couple dance in the music lounge, their movements slow and careless, as if the night held no teeth. But beneath the violins, the ship groaned softly, a warning. No one else seemed to hear it. Later, hours later, a man in a worn coat suddenly dropped to his knees on the deck near me. He began to sob with the raw, ugly sound of someone whose soul has already cracked. I swear the ship tilted a fraction then, just enough to make me grab the nearest rail. The second micro-hook was like a whisper in the wind. "She's taking water." Jonah found me again, his expression stretched tight. "Emily," he said quietly, "if we need to get to the boats later, stay with me. Don't let anyone push you to the back." "Later?" My throat tightened. "What do you mean, later?" He didn't answer, because that was when the horn sounded, a long, low, mournful cry that cut through the night like a blade. The ship had been hit harder than anyone wanted to admit. Officers began moving with purpose. Women were gathered. Orders were whispered, then spoken, then shouted. The Titanic, the unsinkable Titanic, was sinking. Not fast, not dramatically, but undeniably. I watched an elderly man straighten his tie before stepping into the corridor. I watched a mother press her child to her chest. I watched laughter dissolve into trembling hands. And then came the third micro-hook. Jonah pressed a lifebelt into my hands. "Take this," he said. "What about you?" He didn't answer. He just tightened the strap around my waist himself, his fingers brushing my ribs, his jaw set with a kind of quiet, furious acceptance. "Jonah," I whispered, "tell me you're coming with me." He swallowed, eyes dark. "I'll find you, no matter what. Keep your eyes on me." But he didn't promise he'd survive. People began shoving, crying, pleading, but others clung to dignity so stubbornly that they refused lifeboats half empty. The deck tilted more. A spoon rolled across the boards. The lights flickered once. And the orchestra, God help us, kept playing. I was pushed toward a lifeboat as the fourth micro-hook cracked through the night. The Titanic groaned with a monstrous, wrenching sound. A woman screamed. A man collapsed. Officers shouted for calm that did not exist. Jonah's hand found mine in the chaos. "Emily, listen to me," he said, breathing hard. "When you get to New York, find your sister and—" His voice broke. "And remember my name. Don't let it drown with me." I didn't get to answer. A surge in the crowd tore us apart. A sailor grabbed my arm, pulling me into one of the lowering boats. I reached for Jonah, fingertips brushing empty air. "Jonah!" I screamed. He took one step toward me. The boat dropped, and I watched him vanish behind a wall of bodies and steel. I will tell you what happened next. The water, the screams, the silence, the hours drifting in the dark, the moment I almost slipped under myself. But right now, the lifeboat is dropping, the Titanic is tilting, and the man whose name I swore to carry is disappearing into the chaos. The lifeboat dropped so fast the wind was a slap. My breath jammed in my throat as the rope hissed down its pulleys, sending us sinking toward the black, waiting sea. The cold climbed into my bones before the water even touched us. But the worst part wasn't the cold. It was looking up and seeing the Titanic towering above, lights blazing, people screaming, officers shouting, and somewhere in all that chaos, Jonah. I searched for him like a starving person searches for bread. My eyes stung, whether from the wind or tears I couldn't tell. He had been right there. And now all I could see were shadows running across the railings, silhouettes pushing, falling, clinging. The boat hit the ocean with a violent splash. I gasped as icy spray slapped my face. The surface around us churned with fragments of wood and paper and shattered glass. People screamed from the decks far above. Some were already climbing down ropes. Some slipped and fell before touching them. "Row away! Put your backs into it!" the officer in our boat yelled. But half the men refused to row. Half were crying. One kept whispering a prayer. And my hands were balled so tightly my nails pierced my skin. "We can't leave them," the woman beside me whispered. "We can't." But the sailors rowed harder anyway. The Titanic loomed, massive and bright, her stern rising so subtly at first no one believed it. Then the tilt became unmistakable, unmistakably wrong. The bow sank deeper, the stern lifted further. The lights flickered once, and that sound, that long metallic groan, felt like the world splitting open. I gripped the side of the boat. "Jonah," I whispered into the freezing night air. "Find me, please." The ocean was a mirror of black glass stretching into forever. Every row of oars sent trembling ripples across it. The screams grew louder. A man fell from the deck. His body struck the water with a crack. The woman beside me sobbed. I kept scanning the decks. Every shadow became him, every shape, every movement. But the ship was too vast, the night too dark, my hope too desperate. Then came the scream that cut straight through my ribs. A deep, grinding sound boomed across the water. The Titanic's lights sputtered. People froze. Even the rowers stopped rowing. Then, the ship split. Not in a clean, quick break, but in a groaning, wrenching tear that ripped through steel and souls alike. The bow plunged. The stern shot high into the sky, rising like a cathedral torn from its foundation. Bodies slid across the deck. People clung to rails. I screamed Jonah's name until my voice cracked like ice. Everything vanished beneath a rising wall of black seawater. The lights went out. Screams filled the night. The sea swallowed the rest. The Titanic was gone. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then the ocean erupted with hundreds of voices, hundreds of splashes, hundreds of people thrashing in the water. "Row back!" I cried. "We have to row back!" "No!" shouted a sailor. "If we go in there, they'll swamp us." "They're dying!" I screamed. "We can't just sit here!" But the boat did not turn. It drifted, silent except for sobs and prayers and the endless, endless screaming from the dark. I saw a man's head bobbing in the water, then disappear. A woman floating face down. A piece of furniture spinning in slow circles. The cold chewed through my coat, my dress, my bones. Every breath I took felt like swallowing needles. And then, a voice. Faint, hoarse, desperate. "Emily!" My heart slammed into my ribs so hard I gasped. "Jonah?" I stood, nearly tipping the boat. "Jonah!" The officer grabbed my arm. "Sit down!" "No!" I ripped free. "Row that way, I heard him!" "Sit down!" I leaned so far over the side I almost toppled into the freezing sea. But then I heard it again. "Emily!" I screamed back. "Jonah! Keep calling, keep calling!" Someone in the darkness splashed, struggled upward, then sank again. I didn't know if it was him. I couldn't know. And the crew still refused to turn the boat. So I did the only thing I could. I jumped. The water was a knife. I inhaled sharply, and icy needles stabbed my throat. My limbs locked instantly. My chest squeezed like a fist around my lungs, but I forced my arms to move, each stroke ripping fire through my veins. "Emily!" someone shouted behind me, but it didn't matter. I had one name, one direction. "Jonah!" I gasped. "Call again, please!" Then I heard it, closer, weak. "Emily, here." I swam toward the voice until I found a board of wood drifting. I clung to it, chest heaving, teeth clattering. "Jonah!" I called again. Something brushed against my leg. "Emily." His voice was right behind me. I turned, and there he was, pale, shivering, barely afloat. I lunged, grabbing his coat collar with numb hands. He coughed horribly, salt water spilling from his lips. "Emily," he rasped, "you jumped." "I told you I wouldn't leave you." "You should have." He tried to push the board toward me. "Take it, I can—" "You're staying!" I snapped, my voice breaking. "Hold on, don't you dare let go!" We clung to the board together. His hand found mine, fingers barely curled from the cold, but he squeezed anyway. The screams around us faded slowly, replaced by the groans of the sea and the soft slap of water against debris. People's voices turned to whispers, then to nothing. One by one, the sounds of life dimmed until the night became unbearably quiet. "Emily," Jonah murmured, voice thin as thread. "Talk to me." I pressed my forehead to his. "I'm here." "Tell me something warm." My teeth chattered too hard to speak for a moment. Then I whispered, "When we get to New York, I'll take you to Central Park. In spring, when the air is warm and everything smells like rain and flowers." He let out a thin, shaking breath. "Never been to New York." "You will," I whispered fiercely. "You will." His eyes drifted closed. I shook him. "Jonah, no, don't sleep." "I won't," he whispered. "I'm listening." Hours passed, or minutes, or lifetimes. I couldn't tell. The cold slowed the world until time barely moved. The stars blurred. My breath felt like glass inside my chest. The board dipped lower as Jonah's weight sagged. My arms trembled violently. Then, a light. Far away, a lantern swinging. Someone shouting, "Boats! Survivors! Keep calling out!" I gasped, summoning the last of my strength. "Here!" I croaked. "Here!" The light swung toward us. "Emily," Jonah whispered, barely conscious. "Stay with me," I begged, "just a little longer." The rescue boat cut through the water. A sailor reached toward us. "I've got you! Hold on!" My fingers slipped from the board. Arms grabbed under my shoulders, dragging me into the boat. My vision blurred. Shapes moved around me. Someone wrapped a blanket over me, shouting orders I couldn't hear. "Wait!" I forced out. "Jonah! Get Jonah!" Voices answered. Hands reached down, bodies strained. I saw them lift him, limp, blue-lipped, nearly still, and lay him next to me. "Is he—" I choked. "We'll try," a man said, "but he's far gone." "No," I whispered. Please, please don't let him go. One sailor pressed Jonah's chest, trying to coax life back into him. Another rubbed his arms. Someone shouted for hot water. I held Jonah's hand, numb and stiff in mine. Jonah, I whispered brokenly. Stay. His chest rose a fraction, fell, rose again, weak and shallow. Emily. His lashes flickered. Warm. We'll find warmth, I promised, tears freezing on my cheeks. I swear it. His lips trembled. You saved me. You saved me first. For a long moment, he didn't move. I held my breath until my ribs hurt. Then, he inhaled. A tiny, fragile breath. The sailor looked at me. He's alive. I sobbed, choking on ice and relief. We watched the horizon turn gray as dawn finally bled across the sky. The ocean calmed. The stars retreated. And the Carpathia appeared, huge, steady, salvation drifting toward us with smoke rising from her funnels. When they hauled us aboard, Jonah collapsed, unconscious but breathing. They carried him below deck. I followed with weak, trembling steps until a nurse guided me to a cot. Hours later, when warmth had seeped into my bones and the numbness had faded enough for me to feel my fingers again, I opened my eyes, and Jonah was sitting beside my bed, wrapped in wool blankets, face bruised and exhausted but alive. He smiled, small, crooked, real. You kept your promise, he said. I took his hand. And you kept yours. You found me. We sailed into New York Harbor days later. Crowds lined the docks, some crying, some praying, some silent with grief. Reporters shouted. Families searched faces. Names were called over and over. In the chaos, one voice rose above the rest. Emily! Emily Carter! I turned, and there she was, my sister, Clara. She ran to me, arms locking around me so tightly I could finally break. For the first time since the sea swallowed the world, I sobbed freely, shaking in her embrace. When she pulled back, she wiped my tears and looked from me to Jonah, who stood beside me, leaning slightly as he recovered. Is he... He's the reason I'm here, I whispered. Clara smiled through her tears. Then he's family now. That was years ago. Jonah healed, I healed slowly. Nightmares lingered, but daylight carried us forward. We found work, we found friends, we found a little apartment with peeling paint and a window that caught the morning sun. And somewhere along the way, we found that the bond forged in freezing black water could grow into something warmer than anything either of us had known. We built a life, not perfect, not easy, but ours. When I close my eyes, I still see the Titanic glowing like a floating palace. I still hear the metal groaning, the water rising, the screams echoing across the night, but I also feel Jonah's freezing hand gripping mine in the dark, refusing to let go. I survived the Titanic, but survival wasn't the end of the story. Life was, and love was, and every breath I take, every sunrise I watch, every warm day in Central Park where the air smells like rain and wildflowers, that is the promise we made in the cold, kept in the warmth, and carried into the life that followed the night the great ship died. The sea tried to take everything from me. Instead, it gave me the beginning of everything. And that is how I lived. That is how I stayed alive. And that is how I learned the truth written beneath every tragedy. What breaks you doesn't always end you. Sometimes it begins you.